According to General Hospital teasers, Stella Henry may be admitted to the hospital following her arrest. Will Drew Kane's vindictiveness lead to a stroke emergency? Drew went after Stella because he wanted to make Curtis Ashford pay. Yet Stella is the one who is suffering the most now. Stella may lose her job and possibly prison time now that the investigation into medical insurance fraud has begun. Stella will experience feelings of panic following her arrest. The truth of Stella's situation will hit her hard and cause her to become increasingly concerned. Stella will express her concerns to someone later in the week of August 25th to 29th, so she will undoubtedly be nervous. Depending on where the GH writers want to take this plot, it could cause problems for Stella's health. Stella has had strokes in the past, so it could be time for another one. It's easy to imagine Stella's stress levels rising and potentially triggering another big medical catastrophe. Stella could end up in the hospital as a result of her arrest, leaving her loved ones concerned. Stella's life could be on the line at GH if she has a stroke and requires immediate medical assistance. You can bet Curtis, Portia Robinson, Trina Robinson, and even Kai Taylor will be furious if Drew initiates this stroke with his nasty conduct. Martin Gray may become increasingly angrier with Drew. Drew clearly exceeded a boundary he shouldn't have when he targeted Stella, and he may face vengeance of his own. What about Stella? What is her future? Will Stella suffer a stroke or some other medical issue to deal with? Although Stella will face hefty charges, her health may be more important if things go wrong. According to General Hospital spoilers, Drew's callous acts will result in some unexpected outcomes. According to General Hospital spoilers, it's only a matter of time before someone takes action and shoots Drew Kane. Everyone in Port Charles has a reason to want Drew dead, and someone will undoubtedly pull the trigger to ensure Drew's demise. Drew, on the other hand, had a chance of survival, and the cause for his heinous behavior would be exposed. Drew Kane transported to General Hospital after being shot. Drew would be discovered by someone, presumably Scout Kane, and transported to the hospital. The doctors, notably Dr. Portia Robinson, who has her own reasons for wanting him dead, would work on Drew, who is struggling to stay alive. Drew could have suffered serious injuries as a result of the bullet, and it could be a close call for some time. Everyone is surprised when Drew Kane survives being shot. Most people in Port Charles want Drew dead, and don't expect him to survive being shot. Drew survives after many surgeries, which would surprise everyone. Everyone in Port Charles would gain from Drew's death, since they would no longer have to deal with his threats and blackmail attempts. Drew living is the worst-case scenario for many, yet there may be something unexpected that explains Drew Kane's unscrupulous actions. Portia Robinson discovers Drew Kane has a brain tumor after assessing Drew, and seeing that he has symptoms that do not correspond to a gunshot wound, Portia was able to perform an investigation and make a surprising discovery. Drew has a very large tumor in his brain. They need to operate and remove the tumor. Portia would explain to Curtis Ashford that Drew's sudden alterations could be the result of a brain tumor, which has been causing him to act thus horribly for quite some time. Curtis might be astonished at first, but he eventually comes to believe it makes sense. Drew Kane's brain tumor is removed. Drew undergoes surgery to have his brain tumor removed, and many in Port Charles wonder if the old Drew will return once the tumor is removed. Is the tumor to blame for Drew's entire personality transformation? Or is there something else going on here? The operation is long and difficult, but Drew lives and emerges from surgery. Will Drew be able to return to his normal self now that the tumor has been removed? What do you think? What are your thoughts? Do you believe Drew will get shot? Will it be revealed that Drew has a brain tumor? Will Drew be able to resume his normal activities once the tumor has been removed? Keep watching General Hospital weekdays on ABC to find out what happens next. Don't forget to come back here for all the newest General Hospital information, news, and spoilers. The morning began with a palpable sense of anxiety in the Corinthos home. The air was thick with unspoken words and fear, a sensation that something dreadful was on the way. Stella, who is typically so resilient, was detained the night before in what appeared to be a deliberate act of cruelty. Drew, as usual, was at the heart of the storm, his eyes glinting with a lethal combination of triumph and malice as he watched the world develop in accordance with his careful plans. It was no surprise to anyone who knew him that he would plan events to harm Stella, but few could have imagined how far this day would push her limits. Stella tried to remain calm when the cops first came at her house. She had faced numerous problems in her life, and she was proud of her ability to handle emergencies with cool and controlled demeanor. Drew's circumstance, however, was different. Drew made it personal. His acts were not about justice, right or wrong. They were about power establishing supremacy over her, and he had weaponized the law to do this. Stella's mind raced as the police read her rights and led her to the squad vehicle, attempting to come up with a defense, a strategy, anything to offset Drew's insatiable desire for power. Every step she took felt heavier than the previous one, as if her body was aware of the storm's impending arrival. By the time she arrived at the hospital, the results of Drew's vengeful scheme had already manifested in her body. Stella had been complaining about a chronic headache, strange lethargy that began the night before, and limb stiffness that she hoped was due to stress. However, as she sat in the emergency room, her symptoms worsened, including dizziness, confusion, and a searing, blinding pain that spread down one side of her body. The nurses recognized the signals right away and rushed her into the examination room, with the beeping of machinery and the scurry of staff adding to the air of urgency. Her heart raced not from fear, but from the sudden onset of a stroke that was completely unexpected yet terrifyingly timely. Drew's actions, which were plainly intended to punish and humiliate her, had resulted in a situation in which her life was now hanging in the balance. Doctors acted quickly, ordering a battery of tests, scanning her brain, monitoring her vital signs, and planning for emergency intervention. Each instant appeared to stretch into infinity. Stella, who had always been a warrior, was suddenly acutely aware of the vulnerability of her existence. The clean white walls of the hospital room, which had before been so soothing, suddenly seemed to close in, and the sounds of beeping monitors and hurried footfall formed a background music to the drama of her very survival. Stella's intellect, which was always quick and calculated, raced even in the face of agony. She remembered her family, the friends who had helped her through endless difficulties, and the numerous battles she had waged. She thought of Drew, whose vengeance had brought her to this point, and a rush of rage, dread, and incredulity washed over her. Outside her door, the hospital staff hurried with practiced eagerness, aware of the gravity of the situation. Doctors spoke quietly, their voices professional yet tinged with concern. Nurses changed monitors and prepared prescriptions, their moves efficient but not lacking empathy. Stella's situation was aggravated not just by the stroke, but also by the mental pain and stress that Drew had caused, which may have exacerbated her illness. They understood that every second was valuable, and that prompt action may mean the difference between recovery and irrevocable damage. Meanwhile, Drew's joy in orchestrating her arrest was quickly overshadowed by tales of her hospitalization. He had not anticipated the gravity of the consequences, and while a part of him may have felt ecstatic at the turmoil he had caused, there was also a tinge of dread, an awareness that life has a way of spiraling out of control. Those closest to Stella were already organizing, with relatives and friends rushing to the hospital, their expressions a mix of fear, rage, and determination. They were not going to let Drew's schemes go uncontested, and the hospital halls became a parallel battlefield, with friendships formed and methods argued, all while Stella's life hung dangerously in the balance. Stella's condition fluctuated at the emergency room, with the medical staff trying diligently to keep her stable. Her voice was slurred, her movements slow and uncoordinated, but her mind stayed attentive, contending with the conflicting realities of her vulnerability and Drew's shadow. She pondered on her life, its failures and successes, and realized how delicate control was. Drew had always felt he could control situations and bend others to his will, but in the harsh reality of a hospital ward, even his most ingenious strategies appeared meaningless in the face of death. The gravity of the issue gained attention from the media, with speculations immediately flying about the circumstances that led to her hospitalization. The tale was sensational, drawing the attention of people who were keenly interested in the lives of Port Charles citizens. Questions arose. Had Drew gone too far? Was Stella's stroke just coincidence, or did the stress of her arrest cause it? The public scrutiny added another element of pressure, but those within the hospital were focused only on Stella's survival. Every test result and decision made by the doctors was essential. Every action was precise, reflecting the gravity of the situation and the stakes involved. As the hours passed, Stella's family came, their faces furrowed with concern and tiredness. She clasped their hands weakly, thankful for their presence, and they whispered reassurances that provided both comfort and strength. They had seen her through innumerable difficulties, and now, in one of the most tense moments of her life, they flocked around her with unshakable support. The contrast between Drew's brutality and her loved one's genuine concern underscored the situation's emotional depth. It was a moment that highlighted the extremes of human character, from vengefulness to compassion, and Stella found herself caught between the two. Drew, on the other hand, was confronted with a reality that he could not change. The immediate pleasure of seeing Stella constrained and helpless was tempered by the news of her medical emergency. He was forced to face the unforeseen implications of his actions, which was an unusual and uncomfortable period of contemplation. While his reputation for plotting and manipulation led him to believe that he was untouchable, Stella's illness served as a stark reminder that life can be unpredictable and brutal, even for those who believe they have perfect control. Stella's awareness wavered as the medical team prepared to undertake the essential treatments to mitigate the effects of the stroke. She clung to fleeting periods of clarity, aware of the gravity of her predicament, and her thoughts were a mix of terror, defiance, and an unusual tranquility. She pondered on the relationships in her life, the love she had known, the betrayals she had faced, and the perseverance that had shaped her personality. Her body's weakness stood in stark contrast to her mind's might, generating a tension that was both horrifying and strangely empowering. Throughout the struggle, Stella's friends and family were there for her, bringing encouragement and unflinching support. Their presence provided a calming effect, reminding her that she was not alone, even in the face of Drew's unrelenting quest of vindication. They spoke words of comfort, held her hands, and made sure she felt their presence, a concrete barrier against the anxiety and uncertainty that threatened to overtake her. Their commitment and devotion stood in stark contrast to Drew's manipulative tendencies, underscoring the deep distinction between malicious actions and those inspired by care and concern. Meanwhile, Drew grappled with the consequences of his own choices. He had painstakingly planned Stella's demise, confident that his actions would show his control and strengthen his position of power. However, following her hospitalization, he was confronted with an unexpected reality: the fragility of human life, the unpredictable nature of consequences, and the limits of control. While his impulses led him to seize any perceived advantage, he recognized that some forces, particularly the vulnerability of people he wished to harm, were beyond his control. The awareness that Stella's life was on the line added a rare element of uncertainty to his normally measured universe. The hours passed with anxious deliberation as medical personnel worked feverishly to stabilize Stella, their moves coordinated and precise, demonstrating their dedication and expertise. Each minute was vital, each decision had a big impact, and the urgency of the situation required both talent and intuition. Stella's vital signs were regularly monitored, her condition evaluated and reviewed, and therapies were modified in real time to reflect the changing nature of her stroke. The atmosphere in the hospital room was one of intense focus, broken by moments of relief and concern as professionals walked the fine line between risk and necessity. During the medical crisis, Stella's emotional dynamics became more intense. Drew's loved ones faced her, their wrath and frustration barely restrained, demanding explanations and culpability for the events that led to her hospitalization. Drew, ever guarded, kept a calm demeanor, but the tension in the room was evident. The confrontation highlighted the broader implications of his actions, highlighting the consequences that went far beyond the initial arrest. It was a moment of reckoning, a clash of morality, emotion, and consequence that made all parties vividly aware of the enormous stakes involved. Despite the gravity of the circumstance, moments of human connection and empathy occurred. Nurses offered gentle words of encouragement, doctors reassured Stella with expertise and compassion, and her family supplied steadfast emotional support. These conversations demonstrated the human spirit's resilience, the ability to care and concern even in the midst of overwhelming tragedy, and the powerful influence that genuine empathy can have on those who are experiencing crises. Stella, despite her debilitated position, took strength from these contacts, her resolve strengthened by the awareness that she was not alone. Stella's condition began to stabilize in the late afternoon, following hours of diligent monitoring and interventions. The immediate danger was past, but the road to full recovery remained uncertain. Doctors carefully laid out the following stages, emphasizing the significance of rest, rehabilitation, and continuing monitoring. Stella's family stayed by her side, relieved but understanding that the trip ahead would require patience, resilience, and constant attention. The event had left lasting physical, mental, and psychological scars, but it also highlighted the depth of love and loyalty that surrounded her, demonstrating the enduring strength of human connection in times of adversity. Drew's perspective was forced to shift when he realized Stella had survived. The thrill of vengeful scheming had been tempered by an understanding of the limits of control and the potential consequences of malice-driven deeds. While he retained his capacity to manipulate and strategize, the experience provided a unique peek into the unpredictable nature of life and the fragility of human existence, even for those who assume they are untouchable. The juxtaposition between his goals and the resultant events taught him a valuable lesson in humility and forethought, which he would definitely apply in future acts. Stella, surrounded by care and compassion, began her sluggish recuperation, gradually regaining strength in both mind and body. She pondered on her ordeal, acknowledging both the difficulties she had encountered and the help she had received. The experience strengthened her resilience, endurance, and ability to navigate difficult mental and physical terrain. Drew's intentional harm had accidentally highlighted the strength of human ties, the value of support networks, and the enduring power of tenacity in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges. As night descended over Port Charles, the hospital halls became quieter, but the emotional reverberations of the day remained. Stella rested, her body frail but healing, while her family stayed alert, bringing comfort and support. Drew, faced with the consequences of his actions, retreated into reflection, compelled to confront the junction of intent, consequence, and morality. The events of the day had unfolded with a dramatic intensity befitting the intricate tapestry of lives intertwined in Port Charles, a reminder that even the most planned plans can yield unexpected results, and that human tenacity and compassion frequently triumph in the face of hardship. Drew's life had always been tough, full of twists and perilous encounters, but nothing could have prepared him for the series of circumstances that would eventually reveal a secret about his health. It began with an ambush, an unexpected shooting that forced him to battle for his life. The first commotion of the strike obscured the deeper, invisible threat lying within him. As he was transported to the hospital, bleeding and disoriented, the physicians worked tirelessly to stabilize him, unaware that the incident would reveal something far more sinister than the gunshot wound. The medical team focused on Drew's physical trauma, paying close attention to the bullet, but his repeated complaints of headaches and dizziness prompted them to request a series of tests that would change everything. As the imaging findings arrived, the hospital's mood changed from one of urgent medical care to one of intense curiosity. What the doctors discovered was shocking: a concealed and undiagnosed brain tumor that had been growing silently inside him for who knows how long. Everyone, including those accustomed to Port Charles residents' erratic lives, was taken aback by this discovery. Drew had overlooked or ignored symptoms for years, such as sudden episodes of nausea, dizzy spells, and persistent headaches, which he had always attributed to stress. It was as if the shooting had unintentionally drawn back a curtain, revealing a secret his body had been holding, forcing Drew to confront a truth much beyond the scope of any criminal scheme or vengeance plot he had ever devised. Drew was caught up in a flurry of emotions as a result of his revelation. Anger, dread, and disbelief battled within him as he came to terms with the fact that his time may be more limited than he had ever anticipated. At the same moment, an unusual sense of clarity emerged. When confronted with mortality in such a visceral way, Drew began to reconsider his decisions, the people he had injured, and the life he had taken for granted. Relationships he had overlooked or strained became urgent. Previously postponed times with friends, family, and loved ones required attention. Even his enemies appeared to take on a new significance, their battles eclipsed by the fragile unpredictability of his own life. Drew's customary bravado faded as he prepared for surgery and the difficult road to recovery. There were no cunning plans to shield him from this, no quick remedy or dramatic escape. The hospital walls, which had previously served as a backdrop for his numerous adventures and conflicts, had now become a space for introspection and reckoning. Every beep from the monitors and every session with the medical team reminded him that life was no longer a sequence of tactical maneuvers or strategic partnerships. Drew's fight grew both physical and emotional, as he battled for survival while facing the reality of his own mortality. In the days that followed, Drew's story became a quiet but powerful narrative in Port Charles, a warning that even the most calculated and guarded people are vulnerable to forces beyond their control. The shooting, a violent act designed to imperil him, paradoxically served as a catalyst for revealing a deeper threat, one that required a totally different type of fortitude. Drew confronted surgery, therapy, and the uncertainty of prognosis with drive balanced by a newfound humility. The event changed not just his body, but also his viewpoint, forcing him to see the fragility of life and the significance of confronting truths that no amount of preparation or manipulation could ever conceal.